In earlier demos, we made quite a bit of use of the label, so you're very familiar with that. Now what we're going to do in this demo is show what happens when we associate a graphic with a label as part of the label definition. So up at the top down to about here we have all the normal stuff that you expect to see. So let's just scroll most of that out of the way. And of course down at the bottom, no big changes to what you've normally expected to see down at the bottom. Let's talk about the code in the middle here. So here we create ourselves an image view, and then we create a label, but you'll notice that as part of the label definition we give what we've normally been giving, that is a string. By the way, notice that this string is split over two lines because it contains a \n. But in addition to just the string to go with the label, we also have a graphic because this object right here, US, is right here, it's an image view. So this time we're putting a label and an image view together. So this is LB1 or label 1. We then use the set style method to set a particular style, that is a border width of 2 and a border color of green. We set content display equal to current content display dot bottom, and this method determines where the graphic will be in relation to the actual string representing the label. So when we say content display dot bottom, it means that the content, that is the graphic, will be underneath the labeled string. We then set text fill to color red, which means the actual color of our label is going to be red. We then make another label, label 2. This is a circle, and then we actually give not only the name circle as a label, but we actually put a graphic circle together with it. This time you'll notice we've done a set content display dot top, which means the circle is going to appear on top of the label circle. And we set our fill color for the text equal to orange, so we're going to get orange text in this case. Moving on to label 3. Label 3 is the string rectangle, but along with it goes the graphic of an actual rectangle. And this time content display is right, so the rectangle is going to appear to the right of the text label. Finally, label 4, this is a label that says ellipse and has, of course, an ellipse figure as the graphic. We use content display left this time, meaning that the ellipse will appear to the left of the label ellipse. We have one final label to look at, but this one's a little bit trickier than the other 4 were. First of all, we're going to create an ellipse, and we're going to create a string that goes on top of the ellipse, and then that will be put into a stack pane. And as you know, stack panes work in such a way that when you add children to them, they get stacked on top of each other. So that's why the circle is going to be there centered in the pane, and then the string will be put on top of that. That particular label that we're going to put in the stack pane will be like the labels we created before. There won't be a graphic associated with it in terms of an actual label. So in other words, the label will only contain a string, and it will be on top of the ellipse only because we put both of them inside of the same stack pane. After we finish that, then that thing, that unit, that stuff that we just described, will become the graphic for label 5. So let's first of all look at the graphic that we prepare. We'll look at the code for that separately, and then we'll look at how we use it in defining label 5. So here is the ellipse that we make in question. We set the stroke color to green, the fill color to white, and then we create ourselves a stack pane called stack pane, and we use getChildren.addAll to add simultaneously our ellipse that I just described with an anonymous label JavaFX. So that label JavaFX will be on top of the ellipse, and they'll both be sitting together in a stack pane. That's the graphic that we're now going to use in our definition for label 5, the final label in this demonstration. So label 5 is defined as usual to be a new label, and we give it a string to label it, but we aren't done because we're going to, as promised, associate a graphic with this label, and that graphic is the entire stack pane as I just described it. So that goes in here as the second argument. And here we're setting the content display to bottom, which means that stack pane will be underneath the label here that says a pane inside of a label. Now, I don't particularly like the way the author labeled this. I would tend to say something like a pane with a label instead, because that to me seems more consistent with all the other labels. We have a graphic with a label, and label 1 and label 2 has a graphic with a label, etc., etc. I'm not sure I like the term inside. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But if you prefer that, you can think of it that way. But I'm going to change it to a pane with a label. So then what do? Well, we create ourselves an H box, and that's a type of a pane, as you know. We'll call this pane, and then we're simply going to add to our H box all of the labels that we just made up. That means they're going to occur in a big long horizontal row. Label 1 will be the one furthest to the right because it's the first one that we added. Label 2 will be to the right of that. Label 3 to the right of that. So label 1's furthest left, and then we have label 2 on the right, and finally all the way to label 5, which would be on the far right. So let's go ahead and run the demo and have a look at what it looks like. So here we go. Now I note that the stage isn't quite big enough to accommodate everything, so I'm going to just stretch this out a little bit so we get a nicer view here. Okay, so there we go. We have our first label with the string and the content, the display content, which is the graphic on the bottom. Circle, same way. Rectangle, here the display content is to the left, or to the right actually, because the black rectangle is the content. Here we have the ellipse on the left of the label ellipse, and here's this fancy label 5 right here that we did. So we have the stack pane down here with the green ellipse and the Java FX in the middle of it, and then the string part of the label up here with its graphic shown below. And that then concludes this demo.